The only experience I'd ever had of Brecht before was from at A-level drama, and from what I remembered of it, we were, and it feels awful now, but we were taught Brecht as kind of like almost like pantomime kind of theatre, like really, really over the top, like kind of like almost like melodramatic acting, with just like, you know, taking on things like the placards and things, and and singing and dancing around, and I never really got it, so I was really shocked to find that it is kind of the complete opposite of, well, it's just so different to that, so it wasn't what I was expecting.
And for me it was, oh yeah, I get Brecht. It's about, you talk directly to the audience, you're seen at all times, you make them feel uncomfortable. That was I have this, that was my thing. This is very different, and I can't quite explain why, apart from the fact that physically we're doing things that I would never dream of doing. Just because before I've even looked at why I'm saying something or what that sentence means, I'm already thinking about how I'm sitting or how I am physically compared to the other figure.
And the movement thing, you know, yes, there's parts of it when you read about it, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, you know, adopting different body language to suggest age, social status generally, yeah, that's normal stuff. But this is like a more sophisticated version of that, or a more stylized version of that, and I'm starting to get it. But there are times when I feel exactly that. I think, well, I know what I've done physically. Or vocally, but I'm not entirely sure why I've done it or what it's achieved for the audience, or, you know what I mean? That's a bit I'm still wrestling with.
What I've found with the process is I feel like I'm stripping back a lot more, because just like Emma, I came and I went, right, well, don't make any choices, which normally I learn the scripts, I make loads of choices and bring choices to the table, whereas this was very much like, right, okay, well, I'll trust the process and find things in the room, and it's difficult because I'm having to stop my intuition, which wants to go on a journey rhythmically with the text, emotionally, and I'm going, right, stop the emotion, look at, you know, really strip everything back. So it's kind of, it's not what I expected at all. The stylization is not actually about adding loads of things, it's actually about stripping it back for this, which was not what I expected.
Well, certainly I found it that if you're trying to find something, in a way it sort of becomes less organic, you know, because it becomes a precision that you then have to remember to lock in quite early on, whereas, you know, often in a rehearsal process, and even, like say, in a performance process, you know, I mean, you know, it's not unusual to still be getting notes 2 weeks in, you know, but you know, to start to really discipline yourself into saying, no, I can't play with this anymore now, that's it. If something's counterintuitive, I struggle with it. If something's natural, then okay. But when something, you feel like you're fighting against your own instincts to do something, then I've got to remember it, and along with the lines, and then, you know, you think, okay, so now I've got two things to have to remember, and particularly if there's a lot of them, you know, if there's that, then that, then that, then that, then that, then that, you know, so, because you find yourself doing things naturally, but if that's not what's required, then you have to unlearn that.
For me, it felt a bit like that my body was doing one thing, like holding a pose almost, but apart from that, which I mean, I know sounds like a real massive apart from that, I was still saying the lines how I wanted to. So it wasn't that my performance was any different than how I probably normally do it. I was just physically presenting or backing that up, but in a very stylised way. So, I don't know. it wasn't that it was, it's difficult as in that you have to remember it like steps.
Yeah.
So you're remembering a dance routine
Yeah.
almost of, right, this, and when I do that, that comes next. So then your brain is whirling a little bit, but I suppose as you do more often, that will just become like your body, a memory thing anyway, that it will happen as it goes along, and then it will become a bit more fluid, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it really hard also to know where to pitch things emotionally as well. Like, I don't know if that's just me, but I feel quite confused as to whether how, you know, at points, like how emotionally invested you're supposed to become.
I was just thinking about this actually as we were talking, and Paul used the word organic, and that's something that I really strongly use in all of my rehearsal processes in other work, is finding something organically in the moment, and it's very rarely ever the same for me, because I find it in the moment with the other person. So I very much like to kind of let things grow and find things naturally, and sort of, you know, allow that person to change me, and it can be different every night. So for this, I'm stopping thinking, okay, finding it in the moment and going, right, there is a set way of doing this. So it feels kind of like a very beautiful dance in a way. You're fully embodied, you're telling a story, but it's very clear, and it has to be clear within the parameters of the dance, which is the moves, the gestures that we're doing to each other. And it's no less real or no less powerful, but it's kind of more for the audience, which I just have found very interesting. And I felt very restricted. And I've struggled learning my lines a lot, because, yeah, it's just jarred with a lot of instincts that I have, and I'm having to almost relearn that and go, right, no, it's not restrictive, because I rebel quite strongly against restriction. So it's not restriction, it's refinement. So
I've got a bit of a confession really, because I feel that, yes, I'm sort of getting it, but I still don't know what it is. So I'm getting it mechanically, I'm getting it technically, so I can, you know, reach into my tool bag and bring out, you know, make the familiar strange.
Yes.
Because speaking in a different way, modulating your voice, standing in an unusual position is doing that. But I'm still not totally sure why I'm doing it, if I'm honest.
No,
you know, I know I can sort of, you know, make something feel a little bit odd, but I'm still struggling to say, so, but what has that achieved? Yeah, I think it's an iterative process in any way, I think, because you start to do things naturally, but not naturalistically. So you're doing it automatically and not having, I mean, I mentioned to you yesterday about there's still elements where I still have to stop and think, but because they're the most recent changes that you've introduced, or, you know, emphasis on something. I suppose the movement is the biggest thing, I think, for me personally. I mean, there is a bit with the dialogue and the way you deliver it, but certainly the movement and the very precise nature of that movement. Yes, I've done stuff before where the blocking is very precise, and this is taking it to another level, and making that, you know, the showing side of it more clear. That bit, you know, sort of took me a while to get my head around.
Well, what I found really different in this process is the lack of discussion. Like, in most of the rehearsal processes I've been through, there's been a lot of chat, there's been a lot of discussion about character. Why does she say this? Oh, don't you think that because she says that, that means that this has happened? There's a lot of discussion about why things are said. And there hasn't been in this process. And I found that I'd go home at the beginning, I was going home, and still, I couldn't get out of the habit of still doing that. Well, you know, she says that she's never been hit before, so that means she has, she's been a victim of domestic violence, and all these things that normally would have been up for discussion just hasn't taken place here. There's been an absolute focus on her social level and her social standing in relation to the other characters. And that for me has been really strange, and it still is. Having said that, I've really enjoyed this. In a way, it's been really interesting not to do that. Just to go for a character with sort of just that one thing in mind, the social thing, has been a completely new thing for me. I think, in all honesty, I find that it holds the scenes up. So I'm wanting to, and so that whole sort of stop, walk, talk thing, I do find strange still, and why I keep breaking the rule, because however much I'm trying to keep it there, it's just every so often it will just.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's been a very intriguing process, and I think one of the things that I've enjoyed very much about it is the process of refinement. I do very much enjoy that anyway, and this has really kind of brought that to a fore, where you do bring lots of choices and they are kind of interrogated whether they work, whether they're clear or not, and then throwing away the things that aren't clear and really keep paring it down to having something that's very precise, and I do like that. I think one of the things that I've struggled with mainly is the lack of inner life, and that is something that I would very much approach the project before I start learning lines or anything. I'd try and figure out the inner life of the character through different methods, different means, and there's none of that at all. There doesn't feel like there's anything going on inside, which is, for me, is strange, and I think strange in the same way that Emma was talking about, that I don't think I would get used to. So it feels very clear, and it's a great tool, I think, for exposing social mechanisms and for paring it down. But I do miss that inner life a lot.
The one thing I can think of is, and like I said, I would hope do this anyway, but even more so, like actually thinking about the kind of whole thing of society in the play, and like the social class of the character and how that affects the way you behave. Like, and you do that anyway, but I'm just thinking of like scene 2, for example, and I used to, when I was first doing it, I was coming in like being very sassy with Anna, like, what were you playing at? But then I never thought, actually, she probably would feel quite intimidated, even though she's not, a little shy little thing, but she is walking into a very posh environment, and she's not like that. So.
I think even more think about what my body's saying. How the body language is coming across, I think, and what that's saying, and adding that into the process as well as the inner life, and saying, am I doing too much? Can I do less to therefore do more?